Support for Carolina Business Review provided by Grant Thornton, an international accounting, tax, and business advisory organization dedicated to serving middle-market companies. Grant Thornton, a passion for the business of accounting. Novant Health is a not-for-profit group of hospitals and medical clinics caring for surrounding communities. Their nurses, physicians, and staff are nationally recognized for their remarkable devotion to patient care. And by Sonoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
So when it comes to the state of our economic, social, and commercial health, who to believe? Economists? The small business owner? The government? The media? Your own family? It is surely a challenge making heads or tails of our business and social situation. We will take a stab at it in just a moment with a look around the Carolinas for the latest week. And later on, from Western North Carolina's Biltmore Farms, Jack Cecil joins us again.
Major funding also by the Duke Endowment, a private foundation in Charlotte, enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. And by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina, who's responsible for rising healthcare costs. Join Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. This edition of Carolina Business Review was recorded September 9th, 2011. On this week's program, Doug Copeland of the Business Journal, Mark Ferris of York County Economic Development, and special guest Jack Cecil, president of Biltmore Farms. Now, Chris William.
Hello, welcome again to our program. Happy weekend, guys, and thank you for being here. Mark,
thank you.
You know, when it comes to economic development, I guess one of your raw materials is the inventory that you're sitting on, the inventory, the physical inventory of buildings and land and development. Where are you with that? What does it say?
I think, Chris, across the region, from my peers I've heard in both North and South Carolina, there's a limited inventory. Most of the projects that we're seeing now, when we are seeing some uptick in activity, we're beginning to see a stable market return. But it seems every company looking wants an existing building. And if you
versus
look,
what 5 years ago?
Versus a build-to-suit, versus greenfield site, versus going in and from the ground up building a new facility.
Almost always was it like that?
It's normally been about 70% throughout the decade, but now it's up to 90% in terms of the projects that come to both North and South Carolina looking first for an existing building. Construction loans still are hard to come by, and so those companies are looking first to make existing structures work. And frankly, all of my peers, at least in the meetings that I've been in recently, complain about not having adequate inventory to meet those demands.
Now that is almost a good problem to have, I'm assuming.
Theoretically, but as a company begins to search on the internet and looks at our individual websites and they don't see a particular size building that they can use, then they immediately eliminate us from consideration without even looking at the other assets in the community.
You're nodding your head over there, Doug.
Well, we're saying the same thing, and when you say it's a good problem to have, we have a lot of vacant space. It's just not suitable for what these companies are using. So that's our big challenge, is we don't have the space available that meets the criteria that they have, but there's still plenty of old warehouse, old factory space available. So we sort of have both going on, not the new buildings that modern industry needs, and still plenty of empty space.
So, Doug, do you get the sense that people don't want a large continuous track?
Well, a lot of these old factories, though, are broken up. That's the issue. It's not large and contiguous. It's they're broken up with columns, and they don't have the ceiling height that they need sometimes. So it's that sort of thing.
Okay.
We're absolutely seeing you have to have the ground ready with the utilities in. At a minimum, if you don't have the ground ready with utilities in there and ready to build, they pass you by immediately.
And you know, Mark, this is a bit of a tactical thing, but it's also meaningful. It's a small thing, and that is you have to have, at this point, in other words, in your group, you have to have all of your inventory up on the website.
Yes.
If it's not there, then you get passed by.
If it's not there, then the companies are almost always, their first search for information about a community is web-based. And having a good web presence, having an adequate inventory of available property, having everything listed that you can, gives you more opportunity to sell that company, at least initially.
Doug, you talk about clusters and you talk about development. Honda Jet, with some fanfare, announced that they were coming to North Carolina and certainly to the Triad. And head count was going to be at least in the 1,000. Where are we with Honda Jet? How does it benefit Greensboro, Winston-Salem, Hickory, High Point, the Triad? Where are we with all that?
Well, they're ahead of the curve. The original promise was really in the 500 job area at this point, and now they're at about 600 already.
What do you think total head count will be there?
They're talking now 900. And that's a result of something that they haven't officially announced yet in terms of what it's going to be. But they've gone to the county commissioners and the city council in Greensboro to ask for incentives, and those have been approved. The Golden Leaf Foundation in North Carolina has approved incentives, and they're looking at some expansion at the airport. There's a lot of people posturing about what that might be. I happen to think it's for additional parts production, which are going to be high-end, good-paying jobs, and so it's great. They've exceeded their expectations. They're on schedule for this unique jet they're building, and they're very optimistic about sales.
Is this part of a cluster, or is this just part? Is this an ancillary business around an existing manufacturer?
A good deal of what's happened in the Greensboro, the metro area, the Triad area, started off as individual businesses. And I'd like to tell you that there was a master plan 25 years ago, but it's grown into an erythropolis that we've talked about on this program before, cluster. And there is everything under the sun there, seat manufacturing, plane repair, and there's more to come.
Let me stay with you for just a second, because Bev Perdue recently said that she made a couple promises, and I went out on a limb here, I think. Promised that Winston-Salem was going to start to get a bypass that was going to be put in the transportation budget. She also promised that Greensboro was going to have the last leg of that loop finished. Is that an encouraging thing? Do you think that's political rhetoric coming up on an election year for her? How do you think that plays out?
Chris, you can never separate politics from it, so I'm not going to try. I'm simply going to say that for Piedmont, North Carolina, the Triad, North Carolina, it is a huge logistics area, and we need those loops done and finished. In Winston, it's a promise that's been in place for 25 years. It's just been unfair to landowners in that area. They couldn't sell their land because a road was going to come through there, but the state wasn't buying it. I talked to, and I'm not going to name them here, but there are major corporations that are manufacturing based in the Triad that don't ship in things they import, distribution companies, through the Triad. Astounded me because of the phenomenal road system we already have. But they say there's just too much opportunity for gridlock when they're going through and nearby these cities.
And therein lies with that loop, with the finishing of that loop, alleviate that?
It will alleviate that, and these individuals that are importing out of Norfolk and Morehead City and some in South Carolina tell you that they avoid the Triad with their shipping because of the lack of those loops.
Yes. Mark, we talk about the aerospace cluster, and certainly in Charleston. The National Labor Relations Board, it is no surprise that they have gone after Boeing because they feel like Boeing unfairly took some jobs from Washington State and planted them in the Palmetto State. In the General Assembly, or at least in the House in North Carolina, there was a bill introduced, and I want to read this to you. The bill prohibits the NLRB from ordering any employee to relocate, shut down, or transfer employment under any circumstance. So a couple big things here. North Carolina wants to get out ahead of this curve, watching what happened in South Carolina. How do you read that? What's the first thing you think about when you hear about that?
I think this will be the first of many pieces of legislation in both states that'll potentially address those issues. I think the Boeing situation has brought the issue to the fore, of course, but North Carolina's 50th in terms of unionized labor force, and South Carolina's very close to the bottom as well. I think we're 49th, maybe 48th. Back in the 80s, 20% of the U.S. workforce was labor oriented or organized, and now that's only about 11% as opposed to 3.5% in North Carolina and 4.5% in South Carolina. So I think that's an attempt to try to maintain that advantage that we have in terms of recruiting companies who wish to avoid organized labor.
Yeah, Doug, thoughts about that?
It's a huge issue because it really did have a chilling effect on what's going to happen.
Okay, thanks. Let me bring something else up to you, Mark. The House in North Carolina recently introduced, and I want to read this to you. The bill recently introduced a bill, and it reads this way. The bill prohibits the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board, from ordering any employer to relocate, shut down, or transfer employment under any circumstance. This North Carolina General Assembly House bill that was introduced is clearly in response to some of the pressure that's going on between NLRB and the Boeing plant down in Charleston. How do you square this? How do you look at this?
I think that'll be the first of many pieces of legislation that'll be probably in both North and South Carolina, designed to continue to limit the influence of organized labor in the states. That is one of the marketing things that we talk about when we look, especially in the Northeast or West Coast. We tout the fact that we have one of the lowest unionized rates in the nation. In fact, South Carolina is, I think, 48th, and North Carolina is 50th at 3.5%, I believe. So that is
unionized rates, not unemployment.
In terms of unionized rates, right? In terms of labor unionized. So that's something that we talk about with companies who are looking to avoid labor unions.
But Mark, has this NLRB action against Boeing at all? Is this dampened economic development at all, or folks that look at South Carolina go, you know, we don't even want to get in the middle of that?
It hadn't. I think, you know, if there was any situation that potentially would have created an opportunity for the labor unions, it was when BMW came to South Carolina, and we've largely avoided any negative impact of labor unions in terms of automotive especially. So I don't think it's going to limit our opportunity to market to companies.
Guys, please stay with us. We're going to bring our guest on in just a moment. Before we do that, next week on this program, Charleston's Lowcountry has a hot-growing company, has a bunch of hot-growing companies. One is called Vapor Apparel. The CEO of that, or I almost want to say the co-CEO of that, the co-founder of that, gentleman named Chris Bernay will be here representing Vapor Apparel. And then coming up in just a few weeks, we're going to focus on the energy cluster. Both Columbia and Charlotte have put big flags in the ground around the energy cluster. What does that mean exactly? We're going to find out from our panel of experts. Growth is slow, no doubt about that, and there is no exception to that in Asheville. The rate of growth for the last 6 months in the 4 regional counties around Asheville, in that western North Carolina capital, was 0.5%. At that rate, it will take more than a decade, more like 12 years, to make up the job losses that the Asheville region has endured since 2008. Joining us now is business and civic leader and Biltmore Farms president, Jack Cecil. Jack, welcome back to the program.
Nice to be here, thank you.
Does that scare you, Jack, that the rate of growth is 0.5% over the last 6 months and trying to make up some of that job loss?
If you look at it purely from the unemployment and the growth factor, yes. But if you look at the dynamics of the wages in the job market in Asheville, what you've done, we've seen a drop in the manufacturing base, just like every other part of the Carolinas, but we've traded what I call the brawn jobs into brain jobs. So we've lost 17,000 jobs in 10, 15 years in Asheville in the manufacturing, but now we're in more of this advanced manufacturing. And you may trade off number of jobs, but you're not necessarily giving up much income. But the idea of 10 years to pull out of it, yeah, that scares me. So we're trying to diversify our economy.
Can you compress that? Can you take that down to 5 years?
I believe so if we really focus in on the niche opportunities we have in sort of clusters or traditional place-based economic development where you build upon your strength and not try to be someone that you can't be. Yeah. Because there's a number of opportunities going on in Asheville and the 5 or 6 counties around us now.
So I guess how do you leverage that special mojo that Asheville has always had?
Much of it is because of the people who move there, the artists and the creative people. That's the mojo. And if you talk about the people who want to move to Asheville now, that's part of the attraction, the so-called euphemism, the quality of life issue. You can't, the authenticity of that is really a leader and an opportunity for us to build upon in the future. So you go after the higher income industries, you go after the CEOs. That's who really makes a decision. If you can convince a CEO that Asheville has a mojo that they happen to like for their own personal lives and or their philosophy of their company, that gives us a leg up.
Mark?
Jack, talk a little bit about the 5x5 initiative at the Asheville Chamber.
This is our 3rd time at raising money for economic development activities in Asheville. In the past has been really focused on manufacturing and the relocation or the expansion of local manufacturing. Now it's based on 5 clusters, hence the 5x5, 5,000 jobs in 5 clusters in 5 years. And so we're looking at advanced manufacturing, looking at healthcare, we're looking at science and technology, we're looking at knowledge-based entrepreneurship, creativity, and we're looking at the arts and craft. In all of those, we think we have a comparative, if not an absolute advantage over other communities, certainly in the Carolinas.
And Jack, in follow up with Mark, one of the quotes around this initiative, or certainly around the dialogue around this initiative, was you said we don't want to rely on Raleigh, we don't want to rely on Washington. Will this kind of get you off of that reliance? Will this really not jumpstart, but will it take you to that level where you don't have to worry about that?
I remember the quote well, as I said it in the launch of the fundraising effort. It's really not a dependency, it's really taking advantage of what we have and how can we leverage that, working with Raleigh and Washington, but not be solely dependent upon them for handouts and incentives and stuff like that, because that won't work. We have to do it our own based on the strategic advantages we have.
Doug?
Let me ask you a question in the travel and tourism area. The North Carolina General Assembly is going to place this legislation on the ballot to create a constitutional amendment to ban gay marriage. Certain political groups that are having meetings, teachers associations, the Democratic National Committee that's coming to Charlotte in a year, they wouldn't come to a state, for example, in the past that didn't acknowledge the Martin Luther King holiday. We may see the same kind of thing in company relocation, but especially in conventions and meetings. Right. Can that impact Asheville?
Most definitely, because part of the creative talent is the alternative lifestyle that's been evident in Asheville for many, many years. That's the artists, that's our crafters, that's part of the mojo, that's the quality of life. It would hurt the hospitality industry, it would hurt the tourism piece, but I really think it would hurt what's going on in Asheville over the last 15, 20 years, the creation of the place of downtown. Because if you look at all from the festivals, from the Bell Share to the Lexington Avenue Festival, it's all the creative talent, and most of that is alternative lifestyles, and we embrace it in Asheville. That's part of our unique attributes, and that's why many people actually come to Asheville is enjoy the weekends, and so yeah, it has serious impact on our economy.
Well, how's the summer season? You know, now that we're at the end of the summer tourist season, tourism, big driver in the counties. How did it work out?
It's a pretty good summer, actually.
Better than you thought?
Better than we thought. I think people are now becoming frustrated and they want to spend a little money. They may not have an inordinate amount of money, but I think we're tired of the 4 years of the Great Recession, and you have to have a little break every once in a while. We've seen our hotels, the occupancy increase rather substantially in the last 8 or 9 months, which is a good sign.
What's the, you know, for the Cecil family, the litmus test has got to be the visitors at the house. Right. What does that look like?
According to my cousin, I think he's doing well this year. I think they're back to where they have been in the past. Their hotels are doing well, and I think the gate count is up as accordingly.
Yeah. Mark.
Talk a little bit about the sustainability in Asheville. I think they've been a leader, certainly in the nation and certainly in the Southeast in that effort.
I think there's a couple areas to highlight in there. One is our green industry. FLS, which is a solar panel installation, was the 46th fastest growing entrepreneurial company in the country, recognized by Inc. magazine. And so we have the green industry in that side. We also have another industry, the cluster around the natural products and herbal medicines. We have the most biodiverse temperate climate in North America, so therefore we can grow ginseng and St. John's wort. There's a big movement in the United States now, at the FDA level, and certainly internationally, to make sure the integrity and the purity of the product is what it should be. And so we're, through the Ben Creek Institute, are coming up with a relationship with laboratories around North Carolina so that we can test the quality of the product. Another initiative is the farm to table. And we have, at one of our hotels, we had a 30-mile burger, which means all the ingredients from the hamburger during tourist season came within 30 miles. And you know, people like that.
Sure.
And
it's not like Supersize Me. I mean,
no, not supersized. Okay. It's good quality produce. And we have a farmer's market every Wednesday in our town square, our downtown community. And we have seen the increase in sales from last year to this year rather substantially. Part of it is the economy, part of it's tourism coming back, but really it's the acceptance of that farm to table menu.
You've got to have a different blend of housing and housing starts and housing sales than the rest of the region, if you will. Talk a little bit about how housing is doing in your market.
If you would look at our 8-cylinder engine, that's the one we're still sort of misfiring. And much of that's because the growth in Western North Carolina is dependent on in-migration. Traditionally, it's been about 90–95% of our growth rate, meaning other places in the Carolinas, Georgia, and Florida. And with those depressed markets where people can't sell out of the homes, it's hard for people to move to Asheville. The way we look at it, and the sort of the half-full opportunity is, we all want to retire when we're 65. Well, during this Great Recession, I hadn't become any younger. I'm compressing the time now that I will have to make the move to retirement. And Asheville has traditionally a very good growth rate in that 45 to 65 age group. But the nice thing about it, they bring their wealth with them, and they can afford some of the moderate prices and the higher price homes.
Has that slowed down at all?
Oh, that's dramatically slowed down. Where we've seen the growth in the sort of the constant normality is in the lower price point of the housing. But people are coming in paying cash for it now, where they had mortgaged it in the past.
You know, Jack, do you think Asheville is so, we all love Asheville. Everybody goes downtown Asheville or Asheville region or Hendersonville or Haywood or wherever, loves it. But is Asheville so diverse that it's hard to get Asheville and the region looking in the same direction? Because it is so diverse and thinks so separately.
From an outsider, that may be your thought process. From a local indigenous native, it's actually a positive, because if you go into a meeting, and there's all these diverse opportunities and discussions and thoughts and theories, but I usually find that there's a golden nugget in that someplace. You just have to listen. You have to go through all what I call the frickin' and fracking and listen to the conversation. But ultimately, there's something in there that really is unique, and it's good for Asheville. And so I happen to like the diversity in Asheville as an opportunity and a positive to the whole economy and to what goes on in town.
So and sorry to stay with us, guys. So what do you think is underutilized about the region?
I think it's underemployment, because there's many people moving to Asheville who cannot be gainfully employed in what would be appropriate for their educational level. We have a large percentage of the population, that 20 to 25. Yeah. Asheville's become what Boulder was to our generation. It's a cool place to live. Many of those people come with a college degree, but they can't find meaningful employment. So it's a little bit of difference than other parts of the state where we have intelligent people in Asheville. We need to match their brain power with jobs in Asheville.
Wouldn't that be a natural incubator then?
Oh, absolutely. And AB Tech has an incubator. Part of the Chamber's 5x5 is to further exploit and take advantage of those students in town in the software business or medical devices or the Ben Creek Institute we talked about earlier.
What about pulling in some of the intellectual property from Cullowhee?
Oh, absolutely. They have a rapid prototype, and part of the project we're doing now with the Chamber is a collaboration project between the North Carolina Biotechnology Center, Mission Hospital, and Ability, which is part of the Biotech Center, where they're looking to commercialize intellectual property and medical devices. So you can go take the medical device or the intellect out of some of the smaller companies or out of the doctors, the medical community, go to Cullowhee, do a rapid prototype of the project, and then you put it together with their MBA program and other various SBTDCs, and you can create some small business in town.
Yeah.
Jack, we were talking earlier about the inventory of available buildings and sites, and whether it's reality, the perception among the local developers is, well, you can't find a flat piece of property in Asheville. I know that's not the case, but how are you in terms of being able to satisfy the demands of potential prospects in terms of inventory?
We were very lucky, and it's a classic case in point. If you don't have a site ready to go, we were fortunate. Linamar is a Canadian company. Volvo Construction announced that they were moving all of their operations, North American operations, to Shippensburg, Pennsylvania, and a manufacturing operation that employed probably 150 to 200 employees. Linamar came in from Canada, is a vendor to both Volvo and Caterpillar, initially announced 400 jobs and $125 million investment, and that probably will grow in the years to come. But what they were after was Volvo's old manufacturing plant. Building with the bay height and the water and sewer right there, and enough office space that they can expand on about a 60-acre campus. So we do have flat land.
Good.
It's few and far between, and it's out of the floodplain.
Okay.
But we do have to be prepared for those opportunities. And I know there's a couple other that the Chamber is working with now, and it'll be an adapted reuse of a piece of property.
Doug, we got about a minute.
What are some of the high-tech and low-tech infrastructure issues you're facing with this growth? You know, roads, broadband, any of those issues that you're facing?
We're fortunate in broadband. In our Biltmore Park, we have 4 redundant carriers, and we have 2 lines of an OC 192 that go to Washington and to Atlanta. So we have all the fiber we need, plus redundant power. That's not necessarily the case for more rural parts of Western North Carolina. In that area, thanks to some money at the state and federal level through MCNC, we're expanding the internet. But we're still in the age-old discussion about what are we going to do with the Loop Road in Asheville. There's a section between I-26 and the north side of town through I-240, and for 25, 30 years I've heard it's going to be expanded, and it hadn't happened yet.
Well, you know, we were just talking about Greensboro and Winston-Salem both got the promise from the governor that that was going to be put on the DOT docket. I guess that's going to be the next thing is the Asheville loop.
Oh, yeah, we just heard the same thing this week.
Really?
Yeah, there's 3 sections, in the middle section's now on the docket, and 6 months ago it was dropped off the TIP list.
Well, we'll pick it up next time right there. Jack, thanks for being on the program.
Yes, thank you.
Good to have you here again.
Nice to be here.
Doug, always nice to see you. Thank you. Mark, I like the Korean tie.
Thank
Very
you.
Nice.
Appreciate
Good touch. Yeah. Good to see you. Thanks for being
Thank
here.
you, Chris.
Until next week, I'm Chris Woodiam. Good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review was provided by the Duke Endowment, a private foundation in Charlotte, enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. And by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina, who's responsible for rising healthcare costs. Join Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. Grant Thornton, an international accounting, tax, and business advisory organization dedicated to serving middle-market companies. Grant Thornton, a passion for the business of accounting. Novant Health is a not-for-profit group of hospitals and medical clinics caring for surrounding communities. Their nurses, physicians, and staff are nationally recognized for their remarkable devotion to patient care. And by Sonoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.com.